Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Busch Gardens Williamsburg recreation. Last episode we wrapped up the Illy area of the park, having finished building out Pantheon, Apollo's Chariot. Did a little bit of landscaping since then, just to kind of clean up some edges, tweak a few things here and there. But for right now, I'm going to consider this area pretty much complete. I'm sure we'll come back later on to do some tweaking, maybe fix up a couple things. But for now, I'm really happy with the way this is looking. Excited to kind of get away from this part of the park. Been spending a lot of time here lately. And we are moving on now over to the other side to work on Scotland. And at this stage in the build, Scotland is kind of done. It's been quite a few sessions of build time since the last episode. Scotland is one of the smaller areas of the park, so there wasn't quite as much to do here, but there's still quite a bit going on, a bit to talk about. So up here near the front of the park, we have a couple paths connecting Scotland to the England and Sesame Street areas, going into this large main central building which houses the horse stables, and this is where the train station is going to be. And I think there's a restroom in here and maybe some food as well. We didn't spend a ton of time here in my visits to Busch Gardens, so I'm not 100% sure what all goes on in here. But the main event is the horse stables. We got some little horsies, the Clydesdales, roaming around in this little pasture. It's just a track ride in test mode with some horses on it. Simple stuff, but effective and pretty cute. Just have some horses roaming around. We also have a flat ride back here. I think it's called, Little Clydes. It's a kiddie spin around, kind of fast merry-go-rounds type ride, the usual that you have for kiddie rides. Nothing too crazy going on with this one, pretty similar to a lot of other kiddie track rides I make. Just another coaster in powered launch mode. It spins around. No shoestring required for these, pretty simple. Tried to experiment with a couple different ideas for the roofing on this. It's got that kind of canvas umbrella roof for it. I wound up just going back to using the wooden track canvas design that I use for most of the rides in my Cedar Point Park because I thought it looked effective enough. So we're doing that here. It looks okay. Moving on, we got our main event, of course, Loch Ness Monster, the Arrow Looper with its classic interlocking loops. This one didn't really deviate a whole lot from the original draft build that I had that we saw way back in episode 1. I think I did elongate this section here after the first drop. I wanted to make sure that it could get far enough away from the rest of the build here, go over the river and all that good stuff. The shape of everything and the way it connects into the rest of the park turned out pretty nice. Fortunately, like I said earlier, the park is pretty spread out, so there's lots of room to move things when you need to. So I was able to do just straight diagonal track for the second chain lift and this block section leading into the helixes. Everything fit in here pretty nicely. I do have the ride running 3 trains, so we can get the classic synced loops effect over here. It's not quite perfect. They don't enter the loops at quite exactly the right time, and sometimes they're a little out of sync like this. Yeah, that's not a great sync right there. So they'll kind of go in and out of sync over time. There's only so much you can do given the controls available. I'm playing around a little bit with adjusting the wait time in the station here. I have it set to 13 seconds. I might play around with that a little bit more, see if I can get it tweaked a little bit better. It all depends on how fast the trains can get in and out of the station and everything. Obviously the weight of the trains makes a difference as to how fast they move, so it's partly dependent on guest weight, so it's a little bit random. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does work, I think it looks pretty cool. It's fun to see them go through the loops at the same time. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this layout. It doesn't deviate a whole lot from the original. Like I said before, the angles of this section over here with the helixes, not quite accurate to the real thing, but given the restrictions in RCT, not too bad. It does look a little bit weird to see the helix section here. The real life track is, 3 helixes stacked on top of each other inside this mountain structure. When you're on the ride, it's pretty effective. It looks pretty cool. It's a pretty exciting element, but in the game it looks a little bit silly to have all those helixes stacked up. But I am opting for the realism build here, so I'm keeping those. I think it's worth having them in there just to emulate the real ride. I've also spent a significant amount of time on custom supports for this ride. As you can see, they pretty much mirror the sort of lattice structure I usually do for other Arrow coasters and Morgan coasters in the past. My Magnum and Steel Force builds all have similar supports to this. A couple sections of using the observation tower here for some of the chunkier areas. And we're also using some diagonal track here for where the block breaks are. Oh, that was a very good synchronization right there. Anyway, for the diagonal sections, yeah, we got some diagonal pieces of wooden coaster supports. Just the supports themselves can make pretty good triangular structures here that work well if you stack them up. So that works out pretty well. Although I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to stick with the supports that I have here for right now. We got this mix of wooden post fences and steel latticework structure, and that's been my go-to for a while. But looking at it now, I don't know if I'm really a huge fan of the way it looks. The wooden post fences and the steel latticework all look a little bit like too shiny, a little bit too reflective, and they kind of stand out. And they kind of contrast with each other a little bit in the way that the shapes of them are. Like the wooden post fences are really round. The steel latticework pieces are very flat and rectangular looking. So a bit of a contrast there. It's really tough to come up with lattice supports like this in no custom scenery that looks half decent. So probably going to poke at some other people's builds, do some experimenting, and see if I can come up with something new. There's another good sink right there. But I'll probably say that for future building when I have some time near the end of the build. Don't have a ton of time to waste on stuff like that when I've already got one version of it done. But it would be nice to find another strategy that doesn't look quite as weird. Even though I've been using this same style for a while now, it would be nice to find something new. As far as the rest of the Loch Ness Monster build goes, not a whole lot to say about it. I did put a little fun sculpture up here with the diving suit and submarine that are decorating the front entrance. Those are pretty easy to emulate here with a frozen entertainer and a submarine vehicle. Thought those looked pretty cute. And then going into our castle entrance. This is only kind of a rough sketch. I think I'm going to play around with the shape of this a little bit more. Maybe give it a little bit more interest in the shape, because right now it's just a big rectangle. Even when your buildings in real life are big rectangles, I do still like to try to make those shaped a little bit more interesting than that when I can. And we got plenty of room to do so. There's tons of empty space over here that's just going to be filled with trees and water. So there's room to grow if we want. But anyway, other than that, really happy with this build so far, especially after I threw a bunch of trees in here to help fill in some of the gaps. Spent a lot of time on foliage in this build. A lot of gaps to fill in with trees and bushes and everything. Filling in those corners, really helping make the park kind of glued together, looking nice. So this front area, I'm pretty happy with so far. Still some more detailing to do, of course. Just trying to get bits done and plow my way through the beginning stages here. But yeah, as far as Scotland goes, pretty happy with it. Again, a kind of a small area, so not as much to talk about. Still haven't done the train station over here. As I mentioned, the train is going to go all the way around the outside of the park, and I don't know yet what the boundaries are going to look like. We're going to save that for all the way to the very end of the build. So this train station is going to look a little bit unfinished until we get there, but that's okay. So that's about going to do it for today. Not as much to talk about, despite there being actually a lot of work put into this. I guess it's mostly just time consuming to build all these supports and everything. So even though we've had quite a few build sessions, just going here and looking at the amount of stuff built doesn't look like quite as much. The effort to do all this, I think, is worth it. So, but yeah, that's about it for Scotland. I think next we're going to continue along this path here into the Ireland area. We got one ride and a bunch of buildings to figure out, but that will come all in the next episode. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching.